When I conceive a painting, I don't make studies or sketches. What happens is that I really do see a flash of an image of the painting fully formed. So it appears in my mind and I very quickly take a note of that, just a little thumbnail sketch, and I take that idea and make it into the completed work. So what's interesting is you can see, like that sketch there, that's that painting. And that's enough. It goes from that to that. There's nothing in between. My name is Alexander McKenzie, and this show is called The Adventurous Gardener. I continue to work in a very traditional way, so that means doing things like starting point of raw linen and sizing that raw linen with rabbit skin glue. So you actually have to heat the rabbit size, which comes from the skin of a real rabbit, and cook it up, which smells awful, and you apply it hot to the surface of the linen. And what that does is it isolates and seals the individual fibres within the linen and protects them and allows them to take the subsequent layers. You kind of starting from the ground up. It's quite a different process than just sort of painting on something that you haven't prepared with your own hands. Once that has dried to like a real kind of drum state, there's multiple layers of a traditional oil-based prime. So it's not a gesso, it's an oil prime, which again was the traditional way of working for a very long time. I always wanted to paint. I really painted a lot as a child. The painting became so prolific and so problematic, I guess, for Mum, that she designated one particular room in the house for my studio. Set up with easels and paints and mess, and I could go in there and I could make as much mess as I wanted and leave the paintings and come back to them the next day and run it like a studio. And I was 11 at the time. Dad's idea of telling us stories was to illustrate them. So he would sit down and draw the story to illustrate his point. There's no, we lived in the country. There was no TV. There was no film. There was no, technology. So you just kind of drew what you were talking about. And I loved that, and I used to copy it. I suppose I would describe myself as a painter of symbolic landscapes. The pictures, they have elements of different places. So these elements, I guess, are born from partly my memory, partly my ideas, partly places that I've seen or visited, and they're just, I guess, all mashed together in some sort of reconfiguration of those different places. They're not meant to be particularly Australian, or they're not even meant to be particularly not Australian. What it is it's entirely what comes out of me. So for the show, I've made a very big new work, More Than Many Sparrows. It's a picture that took an enormous amount of energy to make, an enormous amount of time, just given its scale. The title comes from a messing up of a Bible quote where it talks about God so loves us that we're more valuable to him than all of the birds or all of the sparrows. How can I put that into an image, and what does that look like, and how do I make sense of that, and do I in fact believe that, and do I understand what that means? Clearly the picture is split in two sides, and they're representative for me of a choice perhaps between two directions that we have in life. One is leading to the kind of the beautiful pink tree, which is a symbol of the transience of life, and it's all kind of lovely and rosy, but the other direction is the storm and the kind of dark clouds coming across, and in that case the actual light suggesting maybe the end point is not where you would expect it, but it exists within the darkness. Perhaps as we look for things that are all kind of beautiful and easy, maybe the real answer is to find the light within kind of all the trouble of it all. As the artist, I am the adventurous gardener, so I am seeking and gathering and pulling together different elements and adventuring to different places to kind of pull all those ideas, pull all those symbols into one place and create this kind of little garden. What they all have in common is a sense of this protagonist, I guess, that perhaps has been in the space that I'm painting. And that's the person that is responsible for the kind of things that you see within the work, the supported trees, the clipped and tended gardens. But perhaps he hasn't been there for a very long time. You'll find in a lot of the pictures there's a little glimpse of red, the red being a warning sign or a danger sign to illustrate the story that is taking place in that particular work, in the way that your eye is led through the picture as a metaphor for the way you are led through your life. You'll come across little danger signs, little warning signs that perhaps that's not the right way that one should head. Every now and again I kind of twist it around and use red as a fortuitous colour, so it does change from picture to picture. In pictures like In Search of a Clear View, you'll see the use of the moon gate. That was something I saw in China, in the gardens in Suzhou. What it did was throw your eye to the space beyond, and it framed what you were looking at through the gate. Again, telling that metaphoric story about looking beyond what we're seeing and what is in front of us to something that perhaps is slightly obscured, and just giving a glimpse of that. In the work titled Five Porches Pool, it's about the story of Bethsaida, where it was a place in the old part of Jerusalem where the sick would come, and on certain times a spirit would come and there would be a movement in the waters, and if you could be the first person to be in that water after the spirit descended, you would be healed from whatever your particular infirmity was. And the narrative that runs in that particular work for me is about trying to seek out my own version of that, my own place where I could be kind of submerged and renewed in the waters as they were moved. A lot of the early landscape paintings I made were Australian. I used to set up and paint landscapes around Cronulla, but also down on the south coast. The burning tree picture, for example, it's a big eucalypt there on fire. In the portrait of Sarah, which was done at Shelley Beach, there's the Australian coast and the rock pool and things. And I guess what that does is it adds a certain sense of place to those particular works. It locates them specifically in that unique environment rather than it being an entirely imagined place. I did have people tell me that they've been to the places that I'm painting, quite energetically telling me about where it was and that they'd been there and they'd actually walked on that little path and they know exactly where it is that I've painted it. But of course, they're entirely imagined, so they couldn't have, but it was a very funny conversation for me. They don't exist. They're taken quite often from different places put together, and that's why you get trees that are Japanese in nature next to, say, trees that are Australian or European, and different kinds of types of vegetation that clearly don't belong together. But as a painter, you can bring them together and make something new to tell a story.